What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sector for Nerds, and welcome to another episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars Retro Discussions. Today we're going to be chatting about Season 1, Episode 14, Defenders of Peace. This episode was directed by Stuart Lee and written by Bill Canterbury. The cookie for this episode: when surrounded by war, one must eventually choose a side. Let's get right into it, folks. Intro guy, your turn. Republic forces in retreat. While rescuing General Aayla Secura from certain death, I mean defeat, Anakin Skywalker has been seriously injured. After a narrow escape, our heroes crash-landed on the remote world of Meridon. Stranded and with no way to contact the Republic, the Jedi receive medical aid from the peaceful LURMEN colonists, but even on this tiny planet, the war threatens to follow the Jedi. Thank you, intro guy, and I'm glad he was able to correct himself there over the whole certain death, certain defeat thing. Obviously, for those who saw last week's episode, you guys all know what's going down. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend that you go back and check out last week's episode that we talked about. And honestly, if you guys haven't seen all the episodes in this series yet, what are you waiting for? I'm having an incredible time, you guys, with this show. I love doing these discussions on Clone Wars because I've been a fan of Clone Wars ever since it was released on Cartoon Network. I was 8 years old. That's why I keep saying, at 8 years old, you guys will hear me say that several times throughout some of these episodes, But this episode, you guys, starts out with a Separatist ship heading towards the surface of the planet. I forget the name of the ship, but it's like the same ships that we see landing on Naboo in the Phantom Menace when that whole invasion is going on. And we're introduced to a new character, a new villain in this series called Lok Durd. I think it makes sense to bring in someone different because you can only have, I feel like you can only have Ventress and Grievous lose so many times, especially Grievous, you know what I'm saying? Because when you really think about it, like, the first half of the season was, like, all Grievous for the most part, and then you had a couple episodes with Ventress, and then you had Nute Gunray for a couple episodes, but this is the first time I feel like where we're introduced to a new villain that we haven't even met before yet. It gives someone for our heroes to defeat. One of the big parts about this episode is Watt Kaa, the leader of the LURMEN people, and his son Wag Too, just having these, like, back and forths with each other, and even Watt Kaa having back and forths with the Jedi as well, because he is so set on his philosophies, you guys. And if you guys could tell last episode too, that was very much how he was. He follows his beliefs to a T, but should he kind of lean up on them a bit? Because it gets to the point where, like, the Separatists ransack their village, and then they find out, like, yeah, they're going to be coming back here, and it's like, okay, they wouldn't be doing this unless they intended to do us harm. And he just sits there like, look, if we plan a defense, if we mount a defense, it's technically still engaging in a battle. So if we sacrifice our beliefs, then we're no better than they are. And he's just, like, so set, like, look, our philosophies, we've been able to use this to survive for generations, and we're not going to quit them now. Not understanding that the Separatists have all intent and purposes on destroying them. But meanwhile, the Jedi have to go into hiding, because if they would have found the Jedi in that village, they would have for sure wiped them out. So we've got our 3 Jedi, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Aayla Secura, and then we've got our 2 clones, Commander Bly and Captain Rex. I love the line that Aayla tells Ahsoka that sometimes it takes courage to stick to one's beliefs, young Padawan, as any Jedi well knows. Ain't that the frickin' truth, Aayla?
Sometimes it takes courage to stick to one's beliefs, young Padawan, as any Jedi well knows.
Aayla was on fire this episode as well, just like with the things she says, and then also her tracking down that probe. Like, Ahsoka, Rex, and Bly, like, they all go rushing after the droid, but meanwhile, there's just Aayla there. Like, she's just walking. Like, every time they cut to her, she's just walking through the long grass, like, kind of almost like, okay, I'm just gonna anticipate this droid's next moves. Where is it gonna go? And then she ends up being the one to kill it, because she's able to outflank it. The Separatists have a new toy in this episode, and it's basically like a giant cannon that shoots out nuclear bombs, but it doesn't destroy droids. It destroys organic matter, leaves machines unharmed. The droids all cheered for it as well, and I always get a good laugh of that every time I just hear those droids cheer. We get to see Count Dooku in this episode via hologram because he's here for the whole, testing experiment of this new weapon. And they fire it, and the two droids that get volunteered are like, should we take cover? No, you idiot, it's not even gonna hit us, and it directly hits them, but like Lok Durd said, it was gonna leave machines unharmed. I tell you what though, you guys, back to the whole when I was 8 years old trope, this was one of the first big moments in Clone Wars where I was like genuinely scared that people were about to die, like our heroes. Now, if you guys remember from last week, and I think I've said this in a couple other episodes as well, but I didn't see Revenge of the Sith until I want to say maybe halfway through season 2 or maybe by the end of season 2, but somewhere in there. I wasn't able to watch Revenge of the Sith until I was 10 years old. And when this is going on, I was 8. So I didn't know who was all going to be in that movie. Obviously I kind of figured Anakin would be, but everybody else, I hadn't seen in any of the other movies, I guess. So this was one of those cases where it was oh, are we about to lose people? Because they're Rex and Bly go down for recon, they go to the ground while the Jedi are up in this giant tree. And the nuclear bomb goes off. Rex is able to shoot his cable up and get there, but Bly trips on a log when he's running, because he's in that mind, he's probably thinking all right, I gotta go, not thinking about what's in front of him. So when he trips over the log, he doesn't reach the cable in time. So I'm oh my gosh, we're about to lose Bly. And then freaking Aayla Secura, she saved him last episode, and then once again in this episode, she cuts a vine from the trees, jumps down, picks up Bly, and brings him to safety. And I'm this girl is the best general. She has saved this man's life not once, but twice.
I don't see any signs of life.
Watch out!
And I told you last week, man, I'm sure if Bly was in that same spot, he would do the same thing. And then Order 66 happened. Why? But like I said, I was sitting there oh my gosh, no, Bly's gonna die. Ayla's going for it. Oh my gosh, Aayla, get there. Can you get there? Are they gonna die too? Are they gonna get consumed by the fire or something? I'd go, oh, let's go. And then once the Jedi realize that the droids are going back to the LURMEN village, it's okay, we gotta go help them. Because Anakin says there's a difference between pulling innocents into a war or leaving them to extinction. One of the more low-key moments of this episode is one of the LURMEN people that was sent by Wag Too to go make sure the Jedi get off-world. He talks to this little bug on his arm, and he says, tell Wag Too the Separatists are returning. And clearly that message gets across because Wag Too talks about it here in a couple scenes. Always been curious about how that stuff works.
Shield generator, sir.
Let's take him with us.
But the Jedi return to the village, and obviously Watt Kaa is upset about this, and he even tells them, look, if it's our destiny to be destroyed in your war, so be it. But there's a line that I love that Anakin says when they're setting up the pods around the village, they're getting the shields in place, and, T gets upset again. He's look, I didn't ask you to defend us. Anakin's all right, look, this battle is inevitable. You can stand by your beliefs, but let us stand by ours. Which I'm sure Watt Kaa in that moment felt, all right, you know what? Fair enough. I feel like he of anybody would get it then, right? He's got his own beliefs, the Jedi have theirs. If they're gonna let him stand by his beliefs, he should be able to let them stand by theirs. And Wag Too has a moment where he's chatting with Ahsoka, and he's very grateful to her and to the Jedi, but he's look, I'm sorry, but I can't help. Many other people agree with me, but we were raised under a very strict code, and we have to respect it even if we don't agree with it. So then we get a nice battle scene between the Jedi and the clones versus the droids, because they launch their nuclear bomb at the village, but the shield protects them. But I mean, had that shield not been there, they would have been wiped out. I love it when Lok Durd says, Squad 1, prepare to charge. And I love that the droids have a prepared to charge stance. There's a prepared to charge stance, and then they charge. That's so funny. I find it funny anyway.
Squad 1, prepare to charge.
Prepare to charge.
Charge!
And so the Jedi, they're sitting there, they're taking on the droids. My girl Aayla was like nailing it in this episode. Like, she had the moves and everything, hitting people with like spinning back kicks and, you know, twirling her lightsaber around herself and everything. I was like, this girl, man, let's go. They take out the first squad of droids, but, you know, as Anakin said, that was just the first wave, because then in comes squads 2 and 3, a lot more droids, too many for them to handle. Anakin says that he's gonna go take out the new weapon while Aayla and Ahsoka go back to help the village, but by that point, they kind of get there a little too late. The clones gotta retreat, they breach through the pods, they take out the shield generators, and it's like, man, what, like, it was one of those moments where I was like, how are we gonna get out of this? Aayla, Ahsoka, they're trying to hold off the droids, trying to fight them off, but there's so many of them, and it's like, eventually we see Wag Too and his boys come to help the Jedi, because he says, look, we have to do this. Otherwise, like, we're all gonna get wiped out. What more are you gonna have them do? We need to do this.
Wag Too, what are you doing?
We're going to help.
I forbid this.
What more will you have them do before we are allowed to defend ourselves? But we have to do this.
And so they take on all the droids. We see Wag Too use these moves on the giant turkey-like creature. Speaking of which, I'm surprised we didn't see any of those animals this week. Like, even if we would have just saw a few of them walking around or something, you know what I'm saying? And so they eventually take out all the droids. Ahsoka, like, just takes her lightsaber, puts it in the ground, and takes out all their heads as they're all just laying there, tied to the ground. I was like, oh my gosh. Anakin takes out the new weapon, captures Lok Durd. Victory is ours.
There goes my promotion.
The weapon has been disabled.
Copy that, General.
And Watt Kaa sits there like, alright, perhaps we do owe you thanks, but I still wonder at what cost. And then it ends with like 3 Venators dropping out of hyperspace, presuming Admiral Yularen and his fleet. Yeah, I feel like this episode had a lot of deep meaning in it and a lot of things you could take out of it. Like the cookie says, when surrounded by war, one must eventually choose a side. That's what Wag Too did. Man, I really was taken back by the whole idea, though, of just this leader in Watt Kaa being like, you know what, yeah, if all my people are gonna die, you know, to be, you know, just so we can stick to our beliefs, then yeah, so be it. But it's like, at the very least, what they could have done was taken Anakin's offer of like, look, we need to get you to safety before they arrive. Like, maybe they could have fit everyone in the village in that shuttle, you know what I'm saying? They could have fit mostly everybody, I would assume. Those creatures are small enough, you could probably fit them all in there. And then when he's like, we will not abandon our homes, and I'm like, okay, Now I've lost confidence in you. Like, I can't take your side anymore. Because yeah, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it too, it's like Anakin offered them a chance to get to safety and not have to worry about war. But then Watt Kaa still just like, no, we're not going to abandon our homes. You guys gotta let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments below, and what you thought about what Watt Kaa's, you know, beliefs and philosophies were. Would you guys have done the same thing he did in his position? Would you have done things more the way Wag Too did it? Let me know. This week's episode and last week's episode are my 2 favorite episodes of season 1. I love this arc. Very curious to see what you guys tell me in the comments below. But that is going to wrap us up for today, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Like and subscribe. And I will see you guys next week for more Clone Wars discussions.
When the 501st was finally rotated out of Felucia, Aayla Secura made a point of seeing us off, calling us the bravest soldiers she'd ever seen. It's a good thing we were wearing helmets, because none of us could bear to look her in the eye.